Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many of you here with me for tonight's webinar. Um, Welcome to the PD in Your Pocket series from the New South Wales Family Daycare Association and Peak Training, of course. So my name is Erin. I'll be your facilitator for the evening. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really eager to get to talk to you all today about something that is really close to my heart and very likely very close to many of yours. So before we get into all the content and everything that we're going to chat about tonight, first things first, I work for the Alana and Madeline Foundation, specifically in the TRACS program. So we work with early years services alongside educators to support staff to develop and apply a trauma-informed lens. That looks like kind of helping educators understand and respond to the presentation and needs of children and families with compassion and with insight. Just so you've got a little bit of an idea about where I'm from and where these two little girls and their dad in the background are from as well. So just before we get any further, I do want to start with acknowledgement of country. So I want to begin with an acknowledgement that just recognises the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you all from today. So this land has been cared for by the Bunurong and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation for centuries, beyond any time I can even comprehend. I know many of you will be joining us from across the country, from lands that carry so many stories of just so many different communities and traditional owners. So we're going to be talking about little people today. So I like to just acknowledge that as a child myself and a young person, I was raised on Kaurna and Ngunnawal and Ngambri land in the Adelaide and Canberra regions. And I'm exceptionally grateful for the custodianship and relationship that First Nations people have and continue to have with those lands and waterways that allowed me to play and engage and learn with nature in my early years. I also want to recognise that in speaking about children and trauma today, it's important to also acknowledge the extent of which First Nations children and families have experienced trauma at the hands of white colonists. And I understand that these communities and their children continue to experience really profound and complex impacts of intergenerational trauma today. So with all that history in mind, I just want to extend my respect to elders across this land and particularly on Bunurong land where I am, both past and present, and welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander individuals and educators who are joining me today, and acknowledge the ongoing heaviness and relevance of this discussion for the First Nations community in particular. All right, so following tonight's training, there will of course be a recording available for you to revisit or to access if you weren't able to make this particular Tuesday evening. I do want to also say thank you to the team who did help set up these sessions and who do the incredible work of editing and making these sessions really relevant for you all. So thank you. If you'd had the chance to have a look at the booklet or haven't just yet, I believe there will be a link that will find its way into your inbox if you had the chance to register. Otherwise, there is a link on the screen for you. And if not, if you happen to be not looking at a screen but listening because you're listening to a podcast, that link is www.nswftc.org.au/PD in your pocket, just in case you wanted to pop it in. So just a reminder, there'll be a survey sent to you after the session as well. So if you get the chance to, those surveys can be really key in funding these kinds of programs. So thank you to those who were able to fill those surveys out for the last session I believe you all had a while back. Alrighty, so what are we covering tonight? Hopefully the title gave you a little bit of an idea. But so tonight we're going to be talking about what is trauma and neurodiverse informed practice. So what does it look like? What does it sound like or feel like? How the body and mind are impacted by trauma, how that impacts learning and behaviour, the power of relationship and connection, what children with additional support needs need from us specifically, and how do we keep those children safe? And then some really practical ways to connect with and support little people. So some things like pace we'll get into, and routine, and self-compassion as well. So it's worth noting that this session is not about what to do if you need to report a child in terms of some worries you have about harm or any risk for each of them. So if you're feeling like it could be useful to have a bit of a a refresher on that in that regard, there is a peak training child protection refresher available to complete, as well as I believe there's some mandatory child safety training that you'll be able to refer back to kind of expand your knowledge on what to do when there are children who really need our voices, where we can offer that to them. I do just want to take a second as well to mention that while we are together for the next hour and a half, I just want to give you some express permission to please meet whatever your body's needs are this evening. I know you will all probably have so many different things on your mind and responsibilities. So if you need to stand up, move around, eat dinner that you haven't been able to eat yet, have a cup of tea, have dessert, fidget. I will always have a fidget in my hand. So please consider this your express permission to show up however you need to get the most out of tonight that you possibly can. I can already see a lot of people are pretty comfortable with the chat function, which is wonderful. Please keep on chatting while we're kind of going through today. And I know later on, if we have time at the end, we will get into some kind of questions in that chat box if we have time. Worth noting as well, just for the sake of it, in the chat, if you are sharing stories or we are kind of sharing anything about different people we work with, I just want to be really conscious that we are de-identifying people because we do have quite a big audience tonight and talking about those families and children in a way that we'd be happy for them to kind of hear us be talking about them. And then lastly, look, we are talking about trauma today. So we know some of the content in the work that we do can be heavy and kind of difficult to process. So it might trigger some of your own experiences or feelings which might feel overwhelming or unsafe for you. So if anything does happen to come up tonight and you'd really like to talk it through, I really do encourage you to reach out and talk it through with somebody who you really trust. As we'll kind of learn as we go through tonight, connection can be really important and powerful in taking care of ourselves. So whether that be a trusted friend of yours, a colleague, a counselor, a family member, I do invite you to reach out. And it could be a really good cue to also check in what resources or services you might have access to in your, particular community or in your team. So yes, please take whatever time you need to look after yourselves tonight. If that means stepping away from the screen, the good news is this is going to be recorded, so you can always come back whenever needed. And please feel free to engage as much or as little as feels safe for you as we move through tonight. And then I'm hoping that you might all kind of humor me a little bit, and I thought we might start before we get into the heavier content, taking a big breath together, both probably for you guys have had busy days, but also for myself before I get too far in. So let's do this together. All right. Well, hopefully we feel a little bit more anchored. Thank you all so much for being here and taking the time today. I know it's a very precious thing to all of you, especially as educators. So I'm extremely grateful for you all being here with me tonight. All right, so you may remember we asked some questions if you had the opportunity to register for the session. So let's have a look at what the answers to those questions were. I was so interested when these came into my inbox and really excited. So a very impressive 46% of you feel like we know some things about trauma-informed practice, which is amazing. And then we've got about 19% know a good amount, balanced out really beautifully with 19% who feel like they know very little, as we get started this evening anyway. And then we've got 15% with a bit like a good understanding and 1% who are all over it. Hats off to you guys. I couldn't think of a more perfect pie chart to kind of start tonight. I think this is a fantastic spread of different beginnings and knowledge and understanding. And I'm really excited to learn some things maybe from you guys along the way when I get the chance, because some days I would absolutely put myself in that all over it category, and then some days this work can certainly be humbling, and my God, I feel like I have so much to learn. So we are all showing up here with new things to learn all the time. And then our next pie chart, which asks which of these kind of ideas best describes your teaching practice. It's terrific to see that 36% of you guys describe your teaching practice as playful, We've got 28% describing as acceptance, 19% of you it's curiosity, and then 16% of you it's empathy, is the idea that kind of best describes your teaching practice. So I imagine that if given the option, some of you might have been able to choose probably more than one of those ideas also. So the good news is where you are leaning into some of these ideas, trauma-informed practice might be a little bit more within reach than you might be expecting. And then our next question looked at what are you most wanting to learn about trauma and neurodiverse practice today? So we've got a quarter here who are most interested in learning about how trauma impacts a child's brain and body. We've got 18% who are especially interested in what exactly this trauma and neuro-informed practice is all about in the first place. 16% really want to kind of understand what these children are needing from us. And then further, there's 39% who really want to learn about how to support a child who's feeling really dysregulated. And I can tell you that doesn't surprise me all too much, and how many of you are really interested today in knowing what can we offer children when they're having really big moments of struggle. It makes complete sense because so often in those moments there's a sense of helplessness that we kind of feel, and hopefully trauma and neurodiverse informed practice can help empower you in those moments moving forward. And then this chart had me really excited. So this one asks, how important is self-reflection and self-awareness and compassion when working with children and families with trauma or neurological differences? So I can only imagine how many stories and moments of heaviness sit in that purple wedge there that says that 65% of you all feel like self-compassion and reflection and awareness are so important in this work. Knowing that importance often comes from this work can at times feel quite heavy. So we can feel how much that misses until how much we're missing that until we find it. We've also got an array of other perspectives. So we've got 16% who feel like it's fairly important. 6 feel like it depends, important sometimes, just depends on the circumstance. 6% not too sure, 5% of you don't see it as your best tool, but is needed. And 2% are feeling like it's not quite as important, and we're focusing quite heavily on children and their needs. So I can see resilience and strength in all of these answers. The work you all do takes so much grit and so much warmth. So I know that will be such an array of knowledge and such an array of skill in that pie chart there too. All right. Okay, so to answer kind of one of the questions from those pie charts, let's kind of talk about what is trauma and neurodiverse informed practice in the first place. So oftentimes we hear about trauma informed practice, and I think there's kind of an idea that there's a series of tools or strategies that we can call on. There's some incredible models that we will use to kind of help us put the theory into practice. But in a larger sense, to quote Dr. Bruce Perry here, it isn't so much what you do, it's how you are. So having a trauma and neuro-informed lens means working from a position of knowing and believing that every child is doing their best in that moment with what they know. It's also knowing and believing that every family is doing their best with the resources they have in that moment. And it's also knowing and believing and honoring that you yourself are doing the best you can with the resources, physical and emotional, that you have right now. So the practice, trauma-informed practice, neuro-informed practice, is holding that knowledge in your mind and in your responses to children and families and yourself. So this practice is grounded in and guided by beauty of difference and individual stories and uniqueness. So we know from recent studies of the Australian adult population that about 62% of the Australian population has experienced maltreatment in their childhood. So that tells us that trauma isn't something that's rare, that most of those living in our country have experienced adversity and likely maybe harm. This is a really confronting outcome and also an incredible call for compassion for everyone we meet. So we don't need to always know what's happened to someone in their life or know the why in order to offer them empathy and offer them support in the now. So the families and children that you work with, the colleagues that we work with, peers, the people in our community, they will all have their own story And we'll be talking today about how connection, especially for little people, can offer those who have been impacted by trauma healing and hope, and offer those who have neurodiverse experiences acceptance and belonging. So today we're going to go through some of the kind of underlying research that informs the way trauma and neurodiverse informed practice looks. And I'm hoping that by talking about the why, that the what and the how will kind of become clearer. Excuse me, and we can really unpack how to apply a trauma and neuro-informed lens to your work in family daycare. So to get into exactly what we mean by trauma when we talk about trauma. First, we kind of have to look at stress. So the different types of stress can really be understood by how they impact our body. So first things first, we've got there positive stress. So that's a really normal and essential part of healthy development. It can look something like your first day of kindergarten or receiving a vaccination or a first day of work for us. We might experience kind of a brief increase in heart rate, mild elevations in our stress hormone levels, but the key thing there being that it's relatively predictable, and we feel like we've got a handle on how it's going to look and how it's going to end. And then we've got tolerable stress response there in the middle, and that activates the body's alert system to a greater degree as a result of more severe and longer lasting stress. So that could be something like grief, losing a loved one, a natural disaster, or a frightening injury or medical episode. Tolerable stress is also often caused by what some people might describe as simple trauma or big T trauma. So sometimes a more single event. So if this activation is time limited and importantly buffered by relationships with adults who can help a child kind of cope with the stress of what's going on, the child's brain and other organs can recover well and from what might otherwise have been quite damaging effects. And then last there we have a toxic stress response. So this can occur when a child's experiencing strong and frequent or prolonged adversity. So things like physical or emotional abuse, chronic neglect, caregiver substance use, or mental illness, or exposure to violence, or kind of a persistent lack of safety and stability without an adequate buffering of an adult to support. Without having those supportive relationships. So this is what we might call complex trauma. So this kind of prolonged activation of the stress response system can disrupt the development of brain architecture and actually increase quite a few, the risk of quite a few different negative life outcomes. So sometimes that can result in poor health, physically or mentally, or having difficulty in school or with focusing, or can increase contact with the justice system as well. So given all that, we can kind of see how there is a real strong connection between trauma and the body. So that shapes the kind of definition that we look to as well for trauma. So we can see on screen that we've got there, trauma is the emotional, mental, and physiological or body residue left over from heightened stress that comes from an experience of threat, violence, and life-challenging events. Traumatic experiences overwhelm our capacity to cope. So when we think about it as an experience that overwhelms our capacity, that can highlight the really crucial role of supportive relationships for children's development, and particularly for children with trauma. So research shows that for children who have a caring and responsive adult, they can heal and recover from trauma through those relationships. All right. So, our stress responses, so that positive, tolerable, and toxic stress we were just talking about, those responses in our body are managed by our autonomic nervous system. So it's set up so that we can feel safe in our body and we can rest and regulate and learn and connect when we're feeling calm. And then when we're not feeling safe, our body prioritizes our survival by kind of redirecting our energy and our resources to the parts of our body that we might need to either run away, fight, freeze, or to appease whatever threat we are sensing. That means if there were a bear chasing us, our body will automatically get us ready by getting our heart to pump blood really quickly, dilating our eyes so we can be more aware of what's around us, and pausing our other systems that we might not need in that scenario. So our system also works like this for threats that might be significantly less obvious than a bear. It's incredibly adaptive, this system, though, as you can imagine, spending a really long time in that activated space, especially as a little person, can really overwhelm the body and over time change the way that we might interact with the world. So when children experience a constant state of stress, the part of their system that prepares their body to respond to a threat becomes much more easily activated and sometimes hyper alert. So they're kind of always scanning for possible dangers. At the same time, the part of their system that supports them to relax becomes actually much harder for them to reach or to activate. So what that means is that trauma and toxic stress changes how sensitive someone's autonomic nervous system is. So for any child to be able to activate their calming system, they first have to develop that ability through relationship with a safe adult. So self-regulation isn't actually something that children are developmentally able to achieve until later in their lives. And even so, only if they've had the chance to kind of learn from others how that looks or how that feels. So when a child's stress response detects threat, if they're in a space alone, kind of emotionally, they might appear to regulate over time if we kind of leave them. But instead, what might be happening, what's really likely happening, is that child might be shutting down or kind of internalizing this stress in their body. So co-regulation and connection with a safe and calm adult is the primary way that a child can feel safe again and that their stress system can relax. So where we're able to connect with a child, we're teaching them how safety feels in their system and how it looks, and we're letting them know that they're safe. So for those little people who are often scanning for signs of safety and of threat, a lack of connection to an adult who can meet their needs represents to them a threat to their survival. So represents almost that bear to their bodies. So especially as for some children, it's really not a given that there will be somebody there to meet their needs. So for some children, depending on their experience of being cared for, it's not always been a reliable truth that there will be someone to look after them and to meet their needs. So you might have heard of attachment styles. So in reference to everything else, what attachment styles and strategies represent is some of the different ways that children's systems will adapt to ensure that their needs are met by the adults around them. So for some children, they experience security from being supported to explore their world with a repeated experience of an available and attuned responsive adult. When they need help or comfort or protection, there's somebody there. For other children, they might actually learn that connection is offered less consistently and less attuned to their reoccurring needs. So those children can become anxious or overwhelmed when they're kind of seeking connection from adults, as they're unsure if those needs are going to be met or can be met. For other children, they might be consistently turned away from or actually rejected when they're seeking help or comfort or protection from the adults around them, and then reduce their efforts to connect with the adults around them. So those children can become a little bit more reliant on themselves than adults and can mistakenly be seen as much more independent or not really needing us. Whereas all of these different attachment styles are communicated through the ways that children engage in relationship and how they seek and accept or even avoid connection. But all children need it. It might just not feel particularly comfortable for all children. So we can notice those different changes in their behavior can tell us a little bit more about what feels safe for them. So attempts to seek connection when we don't have a trauma-informed lens from children, it can look like bad behavior or bad choices sometimes. So it can look like something like throwing toys or using their voice to be really loud so they can make sure that somebody comes over to them. Or they might stick really close to your side so they can be sure that someone will stay available to them if they're not so secure in the fact that they will always have somebody there. It could also look something like following the rules because they know that if they're really helpful, then that's their way of being able to achieve connection or be seen by the adults, around them. It could also be like separating themselves because if they're seeking someone out for help in their experience, they might have been brushed off or ignored. So children behavior send us a message about how connected and safe they're feeling. Children who are using big behaviors or not kind of following the rules are often trying to tell you or let you know that the best way they can that they're not feeling safe. So rather than seeing behavior as a poor choice, we can see it as a communication of need. So if we just looked at the behavior, we might see a child who is looking for attention per se. But if we're able to get curious and aim to see the need that sits underneath the behavior, we may see that this child is trying to send us a signal that they need connection from us, and that connection offers them safety. So each child will carry their own strategies and relationship template. So they'll have developed through their own experience something that tells them how safe relationships are, how likely it is that they'll be heard and responded to, and what they need to do to achieve connection and safety with us or with an adult. So secure, attuned, and responsive relationships with adults can reshape the templates that children carry and create new experiences of safety. So trauma-informed practice is so important in the early years education space because we know that a child's relationship with an educator can really serve as a buffer against these harmful effects of trauma or toxic stress, and it can provide stability and safety that children need to heal. So what all that means is that each child will have their own threshold of what is or isn't safe for them, or what feels safe to them. So even though we may know that we will respond to their needs and that they're safe with us, little people who've experienced trauma might not be convinced or assured that we will remain connected and responsive to them because they've not experienced that reliable relationship in their lifetime in other forms. So what can change that is offering them a new template of reliable and connected care so we can let them know and their systems and their brains know over and over again that they're safe here and that safety is a real thing that they're worthy of. So we know that when children feel safe, they're better able to learn and share and listen to instructions and connect with others and engage in play. I'm sure many of you probably know that to be very true through your work. So for children with repeated experiences that leave them feeling unsafe early in life, that can influence which parts of their brain grows and change and which parts end up in charge. So early traumas teach our brains or teach children's brains to be on the lookout for any danger. This then impacts on what they or what we might say is a typical development pattern, as the survival and feeling parts of their brain take up a lot of energy and become stronger and reinforced, while the parts of the brain that we need to learn and reason and connect with others miss their opportunity to develop and strengthen. So you can see there on the screen those kind of two different pyramids. One, there is a lot of space and energy being taken up for survival and regulation. And the other one, survival feels like a much smaller feat or task. And so there's a lot more room at the top of the pyramid to think and reason and learn. So the part of the brain that allows us to reason and to learn is importantly the part that also allows us to take on other people's perspectives or lenses. So it's the part of the brain that is often kind of switched off, if you will, when children are experiencing heightened stress. So when we are trying to survive, learning and reasoning and considering how others might be feeling become far less important. Our bodies are set up so that we can put all of our energy towards survival and not a whole lot of it towards the other things that our brain is very capable of. So complex trauma directly affects the development of a child's brain, their social emotional skills, and their overall growth long after a traumatic event has passed. So it's not just kind of a momentary thing, it's ongoing. And their system is now structured to be sensitive to stress and change in the future. And that can affect learning and concentration. And importantly, it impacts their ability to trust and relate to others. So all of that, in short, is trauma impacts on our nervous systems so that patterns of protection replace patterns of connection. So for children who might have additional sensory or regulation needs, We can see on this diagram too just how important regulation also, important of a role regulation plays on the way to social and emotional connection and moving through to cognition and learning. So not only are neurodiverse children's sensory needs and tools important to help them just feel okay in their day, but they're also really quite vital to their development because it's part of the ladder that we have to go through to be able to get to the part where we're able to learn and connect. So regulation is just a huge piece of the puzzle when it comes to supporting little people who are neurodiverse to engage in learning and in relationships with others. So neurodivergent children's survival and regulation doesn't just stop with their sensory needs. There's a real truth to the fact that being able to be understood and accepted plays a huge role in feeling safe. I'm sure we can all probably relate to that idea. And stigma and not being able to communicate with the adults who can keep them safe about what it is they need can create a really big barrier to safety and regulation for neurodivergent children, which is why attunement and nonverbal cues can become so increasingly important for these little people in particular. So where we can't gauge exactly what that child might be needing from us, doing our best to let the child know that we're trying to understand, that we're present with them, and that we care about their inner world and what's happening. That in itself can be reassurance and offer a sense of safety because we're letting them know you're not alone and there's someone here who's willing to work hard to make sure you're safe. So that idea just by itself, without knowing exactly what the need is, can have a really profound effect in those moments. All right. Excuse me. All right. I mentioned a little bit earlier that we don't always have to know a person's story in order to offer them empathy and support. So this idea is especially relevant when we're working with little people who present to daycare with additional support needs, that be for connection, sensory needs, needs around their autonomy, routine, or predictability, and a million other things. So we spoke before about how trauma isn't rare, but it is really commonly misunderstood. So autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, though they have a long way to go about being understood in society, they are much more widely understood than developmental trauma is or complex trauma might be. So we have some data that tells us children are far more likely to experience trauma than they are to be neurodivergent. So we also know that it's far more likely for a child to be diagnosed with ASD or with ADHD than with developmental trauma. So what that tells us is that little people who've experienced trauma are likely being mistaken at times for children with autism spectrum disorder or with attention hyperactivity deficit. Oh, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There we go. There's a real overlap in the presentation of children who have experienced trauma and those who are diagnosed with ASD or ADHD. So you can see on the screen now, there's a big long list of the kind of different presentation or needs that we might see and that cross over between children who are neurodiverse and those who've experienced trauma. So as teachers and educators, you are absolutely not expected to be able to diagnose a child with trauma or with additional needs or neurodiversity on your own. That takes a whole team of people and a long time. So your role is, of course, to make sure that the little people in your care feel safe and can engage in learning and in play. So sometimes when we spend a lot of our time thinking about the why to do with a child's presentation, we can miss really crucial messages from them about what it is that they need from us right now. So we miss the chance to attune effectively. Where we're taking on a really diagnostic lens of children's behavior, it means we run the risk of missing some important things from that child. So we might determine that a child's neurodivergent, and that can result in us disregarding the importance of relationship with them, as we might feel that we're not expert enough to help them to grow or develop. Or we might even disregard attunement altogether for a list of strategies and kind of pull away from connection, feeling like they don't need that or want that from us. We can end up feeling as though like this is just how it is and we can't really do much to help. Aside from that, we're risking sometimes missing signs and messages in children's behavior that they're experiencing or are a risk of harm. So missing messages by explaining away things to their diagnosis or under their diagnosis. So we might also find ourselves zoomed in on tools and strategies that focus on that single child and don't take into account the opportunity to reflect on what we can do differently ourselves, or how we can adjust the environment for those children. So it can mean effectively that we end up feeling as though we can't offer the child anything. We kind of give up trying to learn about them without intending to, always without intending to, pretty much. And we kind of let their diagnosis speak for them and their needs. So this overlap in presentation is a really interesting and ongoing area of research and of discussion and debate at the moment. So I really want to make sure that I don't polarize those experiences, given that so many people who are neurodivergent have experienced trauma, and so many people who might have first seen their experience as trauma have now come to understand that they are also neurodivergent. So living with a really sensitized body and mind in a world that might really not understand them means that a neurodiverse person's system is likely more susceptible to feelings of overwhelm and have a harder time accessing connection that could actually buffer those experiences for them. So those children who arrive at services who are neurodivergent often have a sensitive sensory system that they're learning to navigate. So as with all children, they're going to arrive with their own template of what feels safe to them and to their system. So it's in a safe relationship with adults that they'll be able to learn what tools they have at their disposal to regulate their bodies and systems, and to communicate their needs. But it might require from us some additional openness and attunement to understand what those needs look like when they're not communicated to us in a neurotypical way. So without attunement and communication and context, it's really easy for our balance in this space to be tipped to one side. So where neurodivergent children might be seeking connection or regulation, meeting their sensory needs, we might mistake that for signs of harm as well. So it's a really tricky balance. So being able to take time to gather information and pause, communicate with families can be really huge. And of course, listen and attune to the child in front of us. We can better understand whether their behavior is something that we need to be raising as a concern, or whether this is what meeting their needs looks like for that child, and seek to understand how we can support them to express their needs in a really sustainable fashion. And what we know is that for all children, whether they've experienced trauma or not, whether they are neurotypical or neurodivergent, all children thrive when there are adults who are attuned to their needs, who listen and advocate for them, who readily offer them connection, having taken the time to understand and accept what that looks like for them specifically. So any of these presentations that are on the screen in isolation without curiosity ill-equips us and can kind of narrow our gaze. All right. So now, if we're talking about the kind of a little bit more tangible ideas here about what supporting these little people looks like. So knowing the information that we've known now and looked at about nervous systems and how the brain and body need regulation and safety before they can learn and connect, we can now kind of start to think about what things support these children to engage meaningfully and to learn. So here are some ideas that I'm sure you will all have different variations of, and I encourage you to really explore and think about how this is already something that you're doing, and where there are opportunities to further it, or just be curious about what more it could look like. So first thing on there we've got is reliable and safe connection. So the number one tool we have to support children to regulate, you probably guessed it, is ourselves. So our presence, our being with those children, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, is so important and the most transformative thing and healing thing we can offer that child. So what that might look like is letting them know that you're there, available, or if you're not available, when you might next be available. Because regulating and reliable, safe connection does not mean being next to that child always, because that is an impossibility. But what it does mean is making sure their systems know when and where and how they can reconnect with us if needed. So predictability and routine has in our next one here. So for little stress systems who might not have experienced reliable and safe connection and have spent a whole lot of time and energy scanning their environment for signs of threat and disconnection, to know what to expect, whether that is through routine or us communicating what's happening next, that can make such a huge difference to just how safe they feel and how their systems might respond to transitions and change throughout the day. So often transitions can be really difficult for children with trauma. That can have a lot to do with not knowing how readily available connection and safety is going to be at the end of this transition. So if we can let them know what it will look like, it can help with how transitions feel, can help them feel less scary, because they know that they won't be alone. If their system's not sure of that yet, we can offer them reassurance through that. And the next thing we can kind of use to support these children is the idea of choice and autonomy. So both for neurodivergent identifying children and for children who've experienced trauma, the safety that comes with having the option and support to access the things that can bring you comfort and safety is really profound. So providing children a choice and autonomy outside of what we might view as the right way of doing things, it can give them permission to regulate and to practice recognizing what they need and how to communicate that, because that's something they'll need for the rest of their lives. The next thing listed there is advocacy and acceptance. So through your actions and your interactions, letting little people around these neurodivergent or trauma-impacted little people know that there's nothing bad about these children. So there's nothing wrong with having additional connection and support needs. So that could look like offering options for meeting a child's sensory and regulation needs to all of the children in a classroom. Or it could sound where that's not an option. It might even sound something like, I know you really want to turn with the weighted toy. For Sally, she needs that toy in a different way right now. And I know it's a bit hard to understand, but if you had something that you needed, I'd make sure that you had that thing too. Maybe when she's finished, we could ask her to see what it feels like. So making sure children who need more from us don't feel like this is something to be ashamed of by validating their experience and advocating for their needs, being their voice, and not hiding it from other children, but instead kind of explaining and modeling that you can and will see them and their needs as well. And then the last thing on here we've got is self-compassion and regulation. So if children need us to be able to feel safe and to co-regulate, that means that we have to be able to show up physically and emotionally if we would like to be able to offer them that attuned care as much as we can. So to support these children who need more energy and more connection from us, we have to set ourselves up to be able to offer connection and to offer them this calm. So, let's talk about what these children need from us and actually the things you are probably already doing in many ways. So knowing what we know about the way trauma and regulation is managed in our bodies, we can understand how a regulated adult nervous system can start to offer a child emotional resources and the chance to grow and feel safe through this kind of new template of relationships they might be experiencing. So how do we accomplish being a regulated adult? How do we actually offer that to them if that's something that they need? Firstly, a caveat, nobody is regulated all the time. And in fact, you shouldn't be, and you shouldn't ask that of yourself. So we are all experiencing up and down regulation every day, all the time. And when our senses are responding to those things around us, our system is built to respond to them. So it's not going to be a linear day of regulation. There'll be all kinds of things that are helping us through the day, either up or down regulate. So the key difference here is between children and adults. For adults, there's the capacity to kind of practice and develop self-awareness and respond to our own needs in a moment. We have the developmental capacity for that. Children actually are not able to regulate themselves developmentally. They don't have the developmental tools necessary to self-regulate, especially at the kind of kindergarten age. And they don't have the independence or the capacity to access resources like we do to support themselves. So for adults, that's where self-care and self-compassion can become really key. so that we can offer the little people the tools and skills that we have that they don't have access to yet at such a young age and a vulnerable space. So as you can see on this slide here, we have 4 kind of equations. The first shows that a regulated adult plus a regulated child equals a regulated child. You may have guessed that. The second one there shows that a dysregulated adult and a dysregulated child results here in a dysregulated child. The third one there shows us that if we have a dysregulated adult and a regulated child, we will eventually end up with a child who is feeling dysregulated. And lastly, there we have that a regulated adult and a dysregulated child will eventually lead to that child feeling regulated and safe, where we're able to stay in that space for them. So we know that when adults are not regulated, we are also not able to access the parts of our brains that do the connecting and attuning work. So we have to be able to set ourselves up and do this work ahead of time so that we can show up for these little people in the way that I know you all strive for. So as I said, we can't stay regulated all the time, though as adults, we do have the ability to start to notice when we are feeling up or down regulated, and to take actions to bring ourselves back to the present or an equilibrium, and more in the moment for the little people who need us. So noticing might sound like maybe thinking to yourself something like, my heart is beating really fast right now. Or I'm finding it really hard to sit still and focus on one thing today. Or I'm finding myself really distracted today. Just noticing what is showing up for you and actually acknowledging that during your day can be really grounding. But we can either meet those kind of thoughts with curiosity and compassion, or we can often meet them with judgment. So judgment might sound something like, God, I should just be able to relax. This isn't a big deal. I should get over it and stop overreacting. Whereas curiosity and compassion might sound something more like, I wonder why I'm feeling anxious today. Oh yeah, I do have that appointment later, and yesterday was really challenging for one of the kids. I think that makes sense that I'm anxious today. Maybe I'll pause and breathe and just see what I need. Maybe I can step into play with the kids and that will help me ground myself. Or maybe just noticing and acknowledging that I'm feeling anxious is enough today. So the noticing part without compassion and without curiosity is often self-critical. And that won't actually bring us back to a calm system. So self-compassion can and very often lets our minds know, just like we are trying to offer children, that we are safe. We can let ourselves know that we are safe. So the phrase self-care is thrown around a lot in the context of work and home and managing stress and anxiety. So we'll all have our own forms of self-care that work and that feel really restful for us. So sometimes self-care can feel like yet another thing also that we add to our lists that we don't have time for. And sometimes we end up shaming ourselves about not being able to look after ourselves. So when we think about self-care and rest in relation to the nervous system and kind of healing from stress, gratitude and mindfulness and true rest, which is what I call resting without feeling guilty for resting, those things can have really particular meaning and value. So these ideas speak to how self-care can sometimes be about offering yourself actually some grace. So it's not always an action. It might actually be offering yourself grace and reminding yourself that you're doing your best. Self-compassion and self-care is something that takes a lot of practice. So if you're feeling like you're bad at it, maybe ask yourself, is self-care, what's possible for me? Does self-care actually look like cutting myself a bit of slack? Or does it look like finding some time in my day to be quiet and silent? Or does it look like spending time in nature? What's actually doable for me? Because sometimes self-care can just be inside our own brains and inside our own bodies. It doesn't have to be an action if that's not something that feels accessible to us. So children, we know from us, that they need us to listen, and they need us to play, and they need us to accept them and wonder with them and be present. And for us to feel safe and regulated enough to do those things, we have to look after ourselves. So self-care isn't just important so much as actually a real, genuine necessity for your work. So if it's hard at the moment to kind of prioritize yourself, know that sometimes it can be motivating to think about how looking after yourself is actually absolutely to the benefit of others and will mean that these little people will be able to access you and your presence in a different way and offer them healing. So there's a model in trauma-informed practice that was designed to help us develop trusting and safe relationships with children who might have experienced trauma. So it also offers some really incredible information and insight to and opportunities for us to be able to call upon to regulate ourselves during the day and in our work. So, PACE, which I think I mentioned in one of the very first slides, but PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And this was a model that was developed by Dr. Dan Hughes to support people to develop reliable and safe relationships with children, specifically children who have trouble feeling regulated and safe, who've experienced complex trauma. So it gives us a bit of a map about what trauma and neuro-informed practice looks and sounds like. So PACE, yes, highlights these 4 different aspects and values, I suppose, and principles that can really practically capture what it looks like to be a reliable and regulated connection for children. So the first one there is playfulness. So this one is about having fun with children, assisting them to join in that fun. And, we know that joy brings connection, that when we're playful with children, they feel like they're fun to be with, and they get the sense that we are delighting in them, that we're glad to be spending time with them, and that can be really healing. So playfulness also offers children opportunities to laugh and to giggle. We know that releases really wonderful hormones in our body that allows children's brains to know that they're safe and kind of minimizes the need for defensive behaviors or activations of their stress system. Playfulness can also be really good in diffusing tension. So acting silly or giving a response that a child might not expect can be really handy, keep things from escalating. A touch of playfulness can be really useful in keeping minor behaviors and kind of the consequences in perspective. So importantly, it's not always about being funny, and certainly not about kind of making jokes at children's expense, because we can kind of read that. But if we're doing that, it might bring shame to the child rather than joy. So we're going to be kind of careful. It's about fostering joy and fun between adults and children where everyone can feel safe and relaxed. So we're going to be conscious of how playfulness looks as well. And then the next one there is acceptance. So acceptance is about actively communicating to the child that we accept them just as they are. So that means accepting them, their wishes, their feelings, their thoughts, motivations, perceptions, all of the things that are underneath their behavior. So it might sound something like, wow, you must be really mad at me if you want to hit me. So acceptance shows understanding rather than approval or condoning a behavior. So again, it could go something like, I get that you're really upset that I said no. Let's work out a way for you to be angry without hurting me. So the use of acceptance shows children that consequences are about their behavior and not about the relationship with the adult or that like how lovable they are. So a boundary to ensure that a child is safe can coexist with them not understanding or being upset about that. But we can still respond and offer connection when they're having trouble accepting that boundary. So we're not devaluing it by doing that, but by doing so. Might sound something like, it's really hard when you have to wait for the swing. It's the rule that we have to wait our turn, and I know that's really tricky. Did you want to hold my hand while we wait? So we're holding space for both a boundary and for connection at the same time because we know that supports children to engage in that boundary or to listen and to feel connected. And then we've got curiosity. So being curious about a child's feelings and their thoughts and beliefs and wondering with that child about the meaning behind their behavior and why they might be doing the things they do. Curiosity sometimes means making our best guess about what's going on and kind of figuring out with the child together what's going on for them. Curiosity also allows a person to feel heard and understood, and if nothing else communicates that, that you really want to understand their experience, that you're present, that they're not alone, and using curiosity can help promote self-reflection and support them to kind of take on other people's perspectives later in life as well. So it's a really key opportunity to support them to access that tool later on. And then lastly, we have empathy. So empathy is the quality of feeling with a child, feeling compassion for their struggles or their suffering. Empathy eventually allows a child to acknowledge deeper feelings of fear and sadness and hurt or anger without feeling judgment. So statements like, I'm so sorry that happened, or that must have been really hard, that can convey empathy. So sometimes we often, when we really care, especially for children, we have a tendency to try and fix a problem in our response rather than simply expressing a shared feeling with a child. So the Dr. Dan Hughes, he explains that adults can demonstrate empathy by just actively showing a child that that child's inner world is important and that the adult will remain with them during hard times. So when an educator shows empathy towards a child in that way, the educator is sending a message that their distress isn't too much to handle and that they'll get through it together. Perfect. I would love for you to kind of choose, if you'd like to, choose one of those principles to keep at the forefront of your mind for the next week or so. You could even do a term if you want, but just to keep one at the forefront of your mind to see how that might look in your day-to-day, or how you can kind of weave that into your routine already, or your own noticings. So yeah, for educators as well, PACE offers the opportunity to engage in humility and joy in your work, and it gives you permission to hold how you're feeling and how the child is feeling together and know that they are both important and both true. It helps us to reflect on our own work and think about what our actions have been without judgment, and helps us shape self-compassion and understanding for others. So all things that can support us to feel regulated in this work and to be present for children is where we can apply that kind of PACE thinking to our own self as well. All right, moving through. So what I thought we'd just give some really strong ideas about what can we kind of start doing even tomorrow, to start moving towards a more trauma-informed lens and more trauma-informed practice. So I'm hoping that a lot of what we've spoken about has given you heaps of ideas already about what trauma and neurodivergent practice can look like. But I thought I'd give you some really tangible ideas. So rooted in PACE, here are some ideas, some really key ones. So the first one there is called Name It to Tame It. So Name It to Tame It is about labeling and verbalizing children's emotions out loud with them. So the reason that that works or is useful is that we're letting the little person know that we have received the message that they are trying to send us through their actions, and that they are connected and seen and heard and therefore safe. Their system is safe. So we also send a message to their nervous system that we can hold space for how they're feeling, and we can be with them no matter what comes up in their day. So Name It to Tame It might sound something like this. Your eyebrows and your hands are telling me that you might be feeling angry. It's okay to feel angry. I get angry too sometimes. I know it can be really hard to feel angry because it can feel really big in our bodies. Or it could sound something like, is it feeling really extra hard today to say goodbye? It's okay to be sad. I'm here with you whether you are happy or sad or angry or tired. And you know what? Sometimes I get sad too, and I miss the people that I love very much as well. So that's Name It to Tame It. The next one I want to look at is boundaries with connection. And that idea captures a lot of what trauma-informed practice is about. We kind of touched on it in the last slide when we were talking about acceptance. So often when a child is having a hard time listening to something that we're asking, we can turn to using our relationship with them as a tool for compliance. So it might sound something like, I'm not going to talk to you while you're upset like this. You need to go and calm down, and then you can come back, and then we can talk. So that message that we're sending without intending to, most likely, is you've lost access to me while you're feeling this way, and you need to figure it out yourself. So when we think about everything we've spoken about today, we're kind of telling a child who might be trying to communicate to us the best way they can, that they can't access us when they're feeling a particular thing, that our connection and safety with them is conditional. So we can imagine for a little person who's constantly scanning for signs of danger, that their system is on hyper alert, that might only increase their efforts to get connection from us. And in fact, we know that children can only regulate alongside an adult and in connection. So what happens when a child is left to manage an emotion by themselves? It might look like they're regulating, but in fact, it's more likely to feel really overwhelming to their system, and they might be internalizing the stress, though it may appear on the outside as regulation. So what the idea of boundaries with connection touches on is that we can and need to hold boundaries for children to keep them safe and well. We know that. We can also hold these boundaries while being with them emotionally. So holding a boundary while validating that that boundary might be hard doesn't mean that the boundary is any less legitimate. So what we're trying to do is convey to a child that their worthiness and lovability is not tied to their actions. It lets them know that that safety is going to be available for them all the time, and whether they're struggling in that moment or not, but some behaviors are not okay at the same time. So that might sound something like, it makes sense that you're feeling angry. I can see how angry you are, and it's not okay to hit me. If you need to move your body, we can go outside together, and you may not hit me. Or it could sound something like, it's hard to move inside today. I can see how much fun we're having playing out here. We have to go inside now for group time. So would you like to hold my hand and go in together? Or do you want to head in there yourself? Or could we, do you want to race me? Might be a touch of playfulness there. Or, just returning to, I can see how much you'd like to be out here for longer, and we need to go inside. And then there's just a couple little dot points for playfulness there, just a couple of short examples. So something like introducing music and movement to your transitions can really support regulation. Bonus points if you and children are singing a song out loud together. Very good for your body, very good for your nervous system. Transitions can also be really difficult for children with neurodivergence and with trauma. We already kind of touched on that. So part of that can be because it changes how accessible connection is. So music can really help bodies feel okay through those shifts. And the other example there could be doing something wrong, theoretically. So they can show you how to do it properly. So putting shoes on backwards or hats on knees can be a really wonderful way of taking the tension out of those moments, or reading a book upside down. Lets children know that we are present with them, can take some of the fear out of things that might feel tricky or kind of high stakes. And we know that they're more able to learn and listen when they're feeling safe. So it could also sound something like, gosh, aren't we lucky that we can build towers over and over again, even when they crash down? Or, I didn't think that's what chairs were for. I thought chairs were for bottoms and not for feet. I'm sure you can all think of examples when you've probably used something to that effect. And there are moments that it can be so much more useful than other things that we that might feel far more sophisticated. All right, and then I thought worth putting a slide in here as well about what we can start doing tomorrow for ourselves. So we've spoken kind of at length about how children need us to be someone who is attuned and connected to them. But that's not an easy feat in the world that is constantly bidding our attention and time and energy. So we're all balancing so many responsibilities and so many things in our minds. So a really powerful tool that we have when it comes to supporting neurodiverse and trauma-informed practice is wondering. So wondering out loud with children, but also wondering to ourselves. Wondering gives us permission to not know yet. And it gives us the chance to think about what is happening in front of us from a strengths-based perspective. So that can really help our nervous system know that we're safe. It feels better to think about a situation with the knowledge that everybody is trying their best with the internal and external resources that they have in that moment. And it helps our systems know, I'm okay. This isn't an attack or a threat. It's an effort to connect. So rather than jumping to a conclusion or only seeing what is the surface of little people's actions and their family's actions or our own actions, to wonder is to kind of pause and make meaning and understand the experiences and needs underneath behavior. So it could sound something like, I wonder if something has changed at home. That means this little person needs something more from me today. I wonder why sharing is extra hard today for them. Oh, that's right. They've got a new little sister and they're doing a lot of sharing their mum and dad for the very first time. They might need to practice the opposite here. I'm noticing that I'm having a hard time with loud voices today, that being ourselves. I wonder what's going on there. I can't really pinpoint it, but I wonder what playful ways maybe I can support myself with that today. I know there's certain days that loud noises feel much heavier than other days for myself. I wonder what it is about this child that I'm finding myself having a hard time with. Is there an experience of mine that this reminds me of? And how can I remind myself that I'm okay and safe? What do I need? And I wonder what this child's experience of me is. The first step to being able to do that noticing in a way that's useful is to pair it with self-compassion. Noticing can really quickly turn into self-judgment if we're not careful, and that doesn't take us down a regulated route. Asking someone to notice something that they're experiencing, I know that that means that you're asking them to accept what they're feeling and trust themselves enough to ask those questions. So they can be really vulnerable questions that we're asking ourselves. And we first have to, we know we first have to feel safe to then learn from and try these new things. So for adults, we know we can offer ourselves that safety by understanding our emotions are messages from our internal nervous systems about what we need, in the same way that children's emotions are behaviors and messages about what they need. So our feelings are trying to tell us something about what we're experiencing. If we can listen and have compassion for our own experiences, then we can change things as needed. Judging ourselves is actually what keeps us stuck most of the time. All right. And just to put all that in perspective and probably back to some language and things that you guys have heard many times over before, when it comes to the national quality standards and when we're looking at trauma and neuro-informed practice, the standards are underpinned by a lot of similar ideas and principles that we've highlighted today. So if we're talking about if we're talking about child-centered practice, that means we're giving each child the opportunity to be known and to learn and to grow as they are. And we're talking about trauma-informed practice and neuro-informed practice when we're talking about those things. And if we're talking about wanting to shape an environment and shape practice to support a child to learn and be physically and emotionally safe and well, then we're talking about trauma and neuro-informed practice. If we're talking about supporting a child to thrive through respectful and responsive relationships, congratulations, we're talking about trauma and neuro-informed practice. So the approved learning frameworks that highlight becoming and being and belonging also align really strongly with the principles of PACE, actually. So supporting and modeling curiosity offers children growth and learning and understanding and child-centered responses. So helping them be all the things they can be and to thrive. Accepting a child as they are, and allowing them to be who they are, be safe, and feel safe and allow their systems to relax. Empathy says that your feelings belong here and you belong here, no matter what shows up for you. So you have someone who will do their best to understand now how you're feeling, how you can connect with them when you're feeling unsure. And trauma and neuro-informed practice certainly play a role and bring you closer to meeting these standards. So also through, and also more importantly, bring you closer to keeping children safe and seen. All right, let me play an interview that I did with the beautiful Jo Clark for you. And I will see you on the other side for possible questions. But thank you all for listening thus far. Hi, Jo. It's very nice to see you again. Could you please just introduce yourself for us, and maybe share a little bit about your background, particularly what experiences might kind of equip you to understand trauma-informed practice? And then if you can, also just share something that maybe you love or you're proud of about the work that you do.
Yep, big start. But thank you, Erin. So I'm Jo Clark. I'm the service manager at Dubbo Family Daycare, where I've been the service manager and the nominated supervisor for the past 8 years. So a little bit about me. I'm nearly up to 30 years of experience within the early childhood sector. In long day care and family daycare. I've also had a stint in all of that with DCJ as a child protection and out-of-home care caseworker. So I've had that mixture of the two worlds of, what is early childhood and, what is working with lots of little people with trauma and all of that sort of stuff, which I think has shaped my understanding of how to work with little people with trauma-informed practices. One thing I'm really, really proud of is I am proud of our family daycare sector. I am proud of our educators and how we are a small but amazingly mighty group of educators and individuals who are doing an amazing job every day, but especially right now. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, thanks, Jo. Thanks for that intro.
That's all right.
Gorgeous. So yes, very well equipped to be able to chat about kind of trauma-informed practice and what that looks like, both at a ground level and kind of in a system space as well.
Yeah.
So brilliant. And we're very lucky to have you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So next, I'm wondering if maybe you could paint a bit of a picture for us about what trauma-informed practice looks like in a family daycare setting in particular. So even if you have an example from your work, that'd be incredible.
So I suppose the one example that sticks to mind, and I'll share it. It's quite a long story, but I'll share the story of it.
We love a story. Yes.
I'm a big storyteller. Anyone who knows me knows that I'll talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles. But anyway, my story is that I had an educator many years ago who was ringing me and debriefing and doing all of that sort of stuff as we do. And she was talking about a little person who, was her woe for the week, her worry for the week. And she was saying how she had began to regress in her toilet training. And she was wetting herself all the time, and it was just becoming so frustrating. And, she was using that classic, she's regressing and, she's not doing what I needed to do. And it's always happening when they go to pick her up in the afternoon. And she was saying that the family had started to mention it and were becoming quite frustrated around that. So let her do her thing and have a vent and do all of that sort of stuff. And then as we started to talk, I said to her, I wonder what's happening for that little person. What's going on?
Yeah, that perfect, gorgeous question. Yeah.
Started to ask some curious questions around, what time of day it is, what's happening for her, look at the bigger picture and all of that sort of stuff. And, to start with, it was very much that, it's just when she leaves and it's just all of this. And I'm like, okay, just go away. I want you to go away and I want you to have a look at it. Have a think about what is the bigger picture for that little person, what's happening, and what's it doing for you? What's it doing for you at this point in time? Anyway, we spoke about a week later and I said, how'd you go with it all? And she said, oh my God, Jo, she said, I've really started to have a bit of a look at it. And she said, I've noticed that it's in the afternoon. It's always when she's being picked up. I've also noticed that it's changed and now Mummy's staying in the car and it's only Dad coming to the door. And it started then. And I went, okay, that's interesting. What do you think that's about? And she's like, I don't know, but she seems to be really anxious. And I said, okay, I think you need to have a little bit of a look more. I said, let's look at what could be happening. What's the bigger picture? Go away and have a think about it. What's it doing for you with that? And she said, I feel so worried that they're getting cranky at me because I'm not doing my job. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, just stop it.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing how much that can sometimes get in the way of seeing these patterns. Like, it sounds like to be able to validate that was a huge shift, Sorry, continue. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Like I said, can talk underwater with mouthful of marbles. So she went away again. She rang back again and she said, Jo, I think there might be something going on for this little person. I've noticed now mum's not coming to the door, dad's getting crankier. I've tried to talk to mum. There's stuff going on for mum. It's not okay. The little girl is quite anxious now. I think there could be CP related stuff. Long story short, turns out that the relationship was breaking down due to domestic violence. So, and the little girl was trying to use whatever way she could to say something is not right. I don't feel safe anymore. That was wetting herself.
Something's changed for me. Something has changed in how safe that I'm feeling, and this is my best way of showing you. Absolutely.
That's right. So the educator then was able to, she actually stopped the family coming in the door because she knew it was dad that was making her anxious, and she also knew that dad was the perpetrator. She did lots of talk around, you're okay, you're safe, let's do this, let me help you. Would walk her to the door, would give her a hug, just that extra attunement and attachment and connection, and you're safe, it's okay, I'll see you tomorrow, you're going to have a great time, come back and see me, and was really able to be that anchor and that safe person.
That's cool. I love that story, Jo. And also, like, the beautiful other thing about that is that, like, when you think about the iceberg and like a child's behavior kind of being the tip of the iceberg that we can see, and then just the amount of context and information about how safe they are that sits all underneath that. And it sounds like that educator, with your help, was kind of able to speak to that part of what was going on for her. So
that's right.
The top, and it's so tricky because the top part of the iceberg is often the part that we're reacting to. So I love how you were able to kind of help them consider, because like we're human too. Stuff's going to come up for us.
That's right.
Be able to recognize it and kind of see it means that then we can step past that and into, like you said, the attunement and the real kind of like safety offer.
That's right. Like, and as educators, we're all worried of, what's that parent perception of us, and especially in a sole educator model, you are doing it all on your own. You are doing absolutely everything on your own, and you've got so much to think about every day that sometimes it is easy just to focus on the pointy end of the pointy stick, which is the wet pants when dad comes. But you forget the underneath bit, and being able to stop and reflect and really see what's happening. That's the trauma-informed practice. That's when you can actually, put on that extra hat and look after that person.
Yeah, that's it. And like you said, because it's only the one educator, like, relationships are so important.
Absolutely.
They're the be all and end all. So for them to also be able to be able to advocate for that child's needs and say, actually, this is going to be her physical safe space, and actually I'm going to say, can you wait out the front for her sake? And being able to hold that and offer that protection to that child too. Like, there's so many layers. I love that.
No, it was good.
And kind of like, I mean, speaking on relationships as well, I'm wondering, because that story is a gorgeous story of kind of a learning for that particular educator, and for, I'm sure, many others have had very similar kind of outcomes there. But I'm wondering too, what kind of things do you think maybe educators are actually already doing that is trauma informed, that maybe without even knowing they're doing naturally, or they're doing in their practice, that they might not even realize already are trauma informed or neuro informed.
I think I've already touched on it before, but I think the beauty of family daycare is by default, because it's a smaller setting, we have this unique opportunity to have these much closer relationships and bonds and connections with these little people that we're with, and which naturally allows us to become more in tune to who they are, and allows us that opportunity to develop that really in-depth understanding of their interests and their needs. And then, you know, if they're experiencing trauma or they're neurodiverse, you know, we can understand what their sensory needs might be like, what their, you know, what all their little isms are. You know, you get to know that on so much more of an intimate level. And then by nature, we automatically put that into our practices. We automatically know that the ruggy that they need to rub, because that's a self-regulation thing, goes to bed, or it comes around with them in the environment. We know that they need a quiet space, so we make that in our home, because that's the beauty of family daycare. We can offer that. You know, so we do it by default because that's what we do. And we don't realize it. We don't realize it.
I think that's exactly it. I feel like every time someone notices and listens to what a child needs and then adjusts their practice to that, that's trauma-informed. That's neuro-informed practice. You know?
That's exactly right.
Whether that child is traumatized or not, or neurotypical or neurodiverse or anything, like trauma-informed practice isn't just for those children at the kind of pointy end. Like, it's important for all children. Here's my cat trying to make an entrance. Yeah, like the beauty is the environment too. Like anytime that there's a setup, or also like an acceptance of, oh, this food isn't a safe food for them. Or
that's right.
Today those connection needs are much higher, so let me make sure I'm nearby. It's all those things.
That's right. And we, you know, the EYLF talks to us about creating a sense of belonging for our children, and we do that by default through those little things, you know, through all of that little stuff. We offer our little people routine and stability through our day-to-day practices. Like, you know, the little neurodiverse children that I know and have loved, and my own children who are neurodiverse, they thrive on, this is our routine and this is our stability and this is what we do every day. And we offer that in family daycare. We offer that through being the same educator that child sees every day. We're not a revolving door of who is going to be on staff today because we've got staff shortages. It is you every day. And that's stability.
A blessing and a curse, right?
Blessing and a curse. Blessing and a curse. It's just you, but at the same time, it's you. You are the stability. You are the safe person, and the rest then flows.
Exactly. And for those little people who need that stability and safety through that one person that they know, it's a fantastic.
It's there. It's there, and you don't even realize you're doing it. Yeah. So look at you go.
Exactly. Give yourself some credit. I feel like sometimes
that's it.
Trauma-informed and neuro-affirmed feels like this really big kind of list of strategies, when more often than not it's just it's attunement. It's attunement and connection and advocacy and those things. But if you're listening truly and you're present, then you're on a very good path. You know,
you're on a very good path. And then the bigger things that come with working with children like that don't seem as huge as much, because you've nailed the attunement, you've nailed the relationships, you've nailed all of those basics already, just because you do it every day.
Exactly. And in those moments, Jo, when the kind of the everyday stuff becomes more than every day, so when it's maybe harder moments, or and you're working with children who are a little bit more dysregulated, or, you know, come from a trauma background, and those moments of real like need that kind of shows up, what kind of trauma-informed principles do you come back to and return to in maybe a more like conscious way for those children who you're working with?
So a big thing that, you know, we really try and focus on, like I've said before, is stopping and taking a moment and looking at what is the bigger picture
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that's happening for the child? What is it that's happening for everybody else in my care? What else is happening for me?
Yeah.
So, and what is happening for me is that, is it my relationships with who I've got and my support services? Is it because it's triggering something in me?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it? So really stopping and try, as hard as reflective practice can be, sometimes all it takes is just that moment to stop and go, what is the bigger picture here? What else needs to happen?
Yeah. How can I look at it? Yeah, from a bird's eye view. Yeah.
Yeah. And being brave enough to say, I need support.
Yes.
Acknowledging that you are on your own and you need a village. Everybody needs a village.
Yes, because like trauma-informed practice doesn't stop with a little person.
No,
if
that's right.
What they need is you and connection and safety, then you have to be able to be there. And to be there, you have to be able to look after yourself and call on those people that that help you be there, or call on those resources that help you be there. Because that's it. To be able to take a bird's eye view and see what's happening for them, what might be happening for me, what might be happening for the family. It's like that story that you gave earlier. To be able to see the pattern was how maybe we could see, to be able to see the detail of, oh, it's when dad's coming to the door that seems to be making a difference.
That's right.
That gives us so much more information about what that child might need, because then we can adjust it to, oh, okay, so maybe it's a safe person. How can I be a safe person?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's so easy to think that it's us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. And, I think I talked about looking after yourself as well. Like when we're working with neurodiverse children and we're working with trauma, children that have experienced trauma, the vicarious trauma and all of the compassion fatigue and everything that we as educators can feel is real.
Real.
And it creeps up. It creeps up. Because looking after these little people who need extra love takes extra love from us.
Yes.
And you've really got to look after yourself. You've really got to keep in tune with that, because it could trigger stuff for yourself. It could trigger, all sorts of things, or you could just end up being really exhausted from giving. Yeah. We are givers. Educators are givers, and giving so much is tough.
It is tough. Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge exactly that. Permission for it to be hard. Yeah. Because we don't, like, I talk to a lot of educators about how there's a little person who takes a lot more connection to be able to feel regulated. And some days that's exhausting. And actually it's really hard to be their person for this many days of a week. And oh, they're so incredible. I want to spend time with, and their milestones are so important and beautiful. And I can see how incredible and smart they are. And it's really tough. And on some days, oh my gosh, it just takes it out of me. And I wouldn't change them. It's all of it. So like
it's all of the things.
We don't have to cancel one out. It doesn't have to be all good or all tricky.
That's right.
Like, that's not how people work.
Yeah. And sometimes those tricky little people, when they have the most amazing milestones in their life, they're the ones that stick in your brain forever, because you see those moments, and it's tricky work, but sometimes it's the most rewarding.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Jo, because it's like, I feel like and this works really well as what we were going to kind of talk about as well. If we kind of cancel out our own experience of this work that we do, that you guys do, but that we do, it means we can't show up the same, because that's where, I think, in the presentation, we're going to talk about how trauma is about when our systems are overwhelmed and we're past coping, like we're past our bandwidth of coping.
Window of tolerance.
Exactly. Window of tolerance. So if we are past that coping point in our work with these little people who need a lot of support, then that's going to impact our systems. Like, that's just a real thing. And it doesn't mean to say anyone's taking anything away from or or that they don't have, like, I hear a lot of times, yeah, but I've got it pretty easy. They're having a hard time. We can all be having a hard time.
Yeah,
It's all
that's
right.
right. Yeah,
Emotions are expansive. That we don't have to choose who's having a hard time.
yeah,
But the beauty and the difference there being that as big people, as adults, we have the ability to ask for help, to start to notice what's going on for us and meet that with compassion.
yeah,
Because
that's right.
if you notice that things are, if we notice,
Yeah,
if we start to notice the things that are coming up for us, but we don't meet them with compassion, then we're just criticizing ourselves.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And I think, being in a sole educator model, we definitely get into the habit of working in a silo. We're isolated,
Yes.
and those little bits of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and all of that sort of stuff, and looking after the other little people, and it takes those little bits away from us all the time. And that's where we need to as educators and as coordination units, we really need to support each other. We
Yeah.
need to be there. We need to expand our village and really rely on those resources that we've got around us, so that we can be the best people that we can be for those people who need us the most. And that's the little people we care for. Like that's,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Because we don't grow out of needing connection.
yeah, that's
We
exactly
don't
right.
grow out of that. That's
No,
always a real thing.
no,
So with all the ways that, with all the things going on in the world, in the sector, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people in a lot of spaces, especially family daycare. And so, we talked about self-compassion. We talked about being able to kind of give yourself permission to look after yourself, to reach out. And then, when we're talking about trauma-informed practice, rather than it being this big cloud or this big kind of concept, if we bring it right down to like what's practical at the moment with the level of demands that everybody's got in their world, what's kind of one small move that that educators can take towards trauma-informed slash neuro-informed slash attuned practice.
yeah, yeah. I think my educators will all nod their heads and say the one thing that I always say is, when the world gets too big, pump the brakes, stop, and just play. Just go back to the very core reason why you are there in the first place. You started in this industry because you love being with children. So if nothing else, if it's all too big, find Play-Doh, dance and sing, do whatever it is that you need to do to make life simple and joyful for everyone. Just play, just be. The rest will come. It's okay. Just be. Yeah, just play.
Exactly. And the beauty of everything that we've spoken about in this whole presentation, and you and I as well, is that play, funnily enough, is perhaps the most regulating thing that you can do. True play of being present, of being, having some humility, sends signals to your nervous system that you're safe.
You're safe. And it fills you with
we
joy.
Exactly.
To be silly and to play brings those endorphins that we all need. It brings, all the serotonin and all the good things when you can just smile and laugh and play and be. And what an amazing healing thing that is when we've all got so much trauma and hecticness happening in the world. Just play and be, the rest will follow.
That's it. There's nothing more precious than those things, though.
That's it. We've got this small window of time where we can play, and children can play with innocence and freedom. So just do it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that, Jo. Let's just end it there.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much for chatting with me. Like, it's been
absolute
so
pleasure.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's absolute pleasure.
All right. For everybody who is still with me, thank you for sitting through that. It was, I don't know if Jo is here or going to come back and watch this at some stage, but it was such a pleasure and delight to get to talk with Jo. And such an honor to hear about her stories and her experiences, and just to get to talk with her about all of her wisdom. So it was an incredible opportunity to get to talk to one of you, and I'm sure so many family daycare educators carry so much of the same wisdom and passion as Jo does. So just want to express my gratitude to her. I am really aware of the time and how precious all of your time is. So this slide is for questions, but I'm questioning, funnily enough, whether or not to do questions, because I really would like you to make sure you're looking after yourselves this evening. So instead, what I will say is that that booklet will be available to you all via the link. And here is also a list of resources and supports, just some phone numbers and some links in case what we were talking about today felt especially heavy or hard for any particular reason. If you find yourself sitting with some heavy stuff, like we talked about a lot today, connection can be a really beautiful move towards safety. So I hope you're all able to take those steps. This evening, I should say, it's 8:30 p.m. and is not the afternoon. Yes, in that booklet are also a number of resources on some of the things we talked about to do with PACE and Name It to Tame It, and a few things about boundaries and language. So go have a squiz through the booklet. There's so much information at the end for you all. And thank you guys so much for joining me. I know that it's a long time in an evening with very busy lives. So very grateful to you all for being here. And I will send you off into your evenings. I hope you all look after yourselves and rest up before, I'm sure, a busy day tomorrow. Amazing. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks for participating in this episode of PD in Your Pocket. This series was produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal peoples. If you'd like to watch or listen to other episodes in this series, or find out more information about this program, you can find us at our website at nswftc.org.au/PD in your pocket.